Welcome back, everybody, to the ATB NFL Live Show. We're back again this week. I missed last week. I think we're all a little too tired from New Year's celebrations, so we didn't want to have to try to struggle through it for everyone to watch. But back this week, missed a lot of stuff from last week, definitely, and there's a big one that we'll definitely start off with. And Tony will know more about than just about anybody else, or at least should for the situation. But before we get into the games and before we get into what's going on around the league, there is again one major topic that do have to spend some time on. I definitely have a couple things to talk about. And luckily, we do get to talk about it kind of after the fact where it has improved the situation at least. And that's, of course, the Damar Hamlin situation on Monday Night Football against the Bengals Bills. I didn't get to see it live. I'm kind of glad I didn't because I don't know really how I would have reacted to it, honestly. It was very scary. I did see the video after the fact, and obviously, Tony, I know that I'm sure, watching the game and saw that live. Just kind of tell me what you were thinking at the time that it happened, and obviously more about how it's gone since then for the Bills and for Hamlin.
Yeah, first off, I just want to start and say I feel like we're all really blessed that we're able to be talking about this, and I think there's a lot of ways this could have gone where we're still not even doing a show today. We're not comfortable talking about sports in general. Kudos to the entire medical training staff, Denny Kellington specifically, who immediately jumped into life-saving measures when he realized the gravity of the situation. So my first thoughts, as football fans, we expect to see some horrific stuff. We expect to see big hits. It's a violent game. We know that. We expect to see broken bones. We expect to see ambulances on the field sometimes and very emotional, heavy moments with injuries that are very serious, but we never expect to have to process or witness somebody fighting for his life on the football field. And that it was really heavy. And I think it's going to change the way a lot of people view football. It's going to change the way a lot of players view football. So my first thought when he went down, I was like, shit, we just lost Taron Johnson to a concussion on the first drive. Now it looks like Damar Hamlin's down. And then you instantly see the frantic nature in which Dane Jackson is calling for trainers, in which players are just clearly in shock before we understand what's happening. The players just signaling that something serious and abnormal was happening. And then the immediacy with which the ambulance was rushed onto the field, with the players forming the circle so that the cameras couldn't get in. Thank God the cameras couldn't get in. And then just the terrible 20 minutes that ensued where we had no information. And we're hearing that he's getting CPR, life-saving measures, just not understanding what's going on. The looks on the players' faces, the very real tears on the sideline. It was horrific. And it was something I never expected to see in football, and you expect to see a lot. And so going from where we were Monday night, where, I mean, I was just refreshing Twitter. I'm sure everybody was doing it until like 2, 3 a.m. I couldn't sleep. It affected me the whole week. Just going from that, where there was real fear that this incredible young man who was just out there playing his dream was going to lose his life at 24. Going from there to where we are today, knowing that he's awake, the tube has been removed. He's talking to his family and friends. He's gesturing. He's flexing on a FaceTime with the Bills, doing his signature heart with his hands, and just all right seeming himself. It's an absolute miracle. All credit goes to Denny Kellington, like I said, but everybody who was there at the stadium who helped, everybody at UC Medical Clinic. And it's weird to say, but there's not a better place it could have happened. Being in Cincinnati on that football field, they were prepared. And the UC Medical Center, level 1 trauma center, just hats off to them. They saved his life, and not only saved his life, but it appears did it in such swift fashion that he's actually going to return to some amount of normal. And we don't know for sure what long lasting impacts will be, but the fact that he is himself and he's moving his extremities, he's talking to loved ones, is just so incredible. So it was a terrifying incident. I'm still very shaken from it. it's gonna be hard to watch players take the field again, because now that fear is there. That was never there. It was never something you thought could happen. But now that fear's there, and it's just seeing the unity that came out of it was incredible. It sucks that it takes something so serious, but that was one thing that I thought was really beautiful, was just how quickly everybody just unified. Started donating to his charity, which is now like over $7 million. Started off with a $2,500 goal. That's incredible.
Yeah.
And he is awake and hearing that news. So it's just, it was really, really scary incident, but I'm just feeling really, really good that we're able to be here talking about it, knowing the good news that we know, after seeing how bad it could have been in the moment.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I think this comes down to, is like in the moment when you hear CPR, right? Now, I know a lot of people, if you don't have any medical background, if you only watch, if you've only seen stuff on TV, whatever, CPR doesn't look like that terrible of a thing. But for those who know what goes into CPR and like what actually happens in that case, you pretty much have to destroy somebody's body in order to save them. Like, you oftentimes will break ribs, you crack all sorts, like, it is a traumatic thing to happen to someone, on top of the fact their heart is stopped, right? This is not a minor thing. Like, CPR does not often even have that great of a success rate, let alone actually like able to save someone's life truly. And the fact that they were able to get him to a hospital and to a point where he was able to recover enough to have, it seems like, full neurological function, it doesn't happen that much. Like, this is very much a situation where it could have easily been where, yeah, maybe he's alive, but he's not going to wake up. Or if he does wake up, he's not going to be himself. He may never, be the guy that he was, 5 minutes ago, whenever he was upright and playing football. Like, and the fact that that seems to be the case where he is going to be able to return to at least a level of normalcy that most people don't have in that situation is astonishing, honestly, especially in the situation he's in, because he's not, obviously being so close to UC Medical and like having that hospital, and their fantastic hospital, played a part in that. But the first responders on the field to be able to get him to a point where they could transfer him to a hospital safely is insane to me. Like, it just doesn't happen that much. Like, people will tell you and my girlfriend is in healthcare. She doesn't, she's not like a nurse or anything like that, but she's seen a lot of this happen before. She's seen that stuff, and it was way less likely for you to survive that and thrive from that than people think about, who don't realize the odds of that. And that's what I'm thinking about now, is the fact that we are going to be able to see him in some capacity return to his normal life. Obviously, I assume we'll probably never see him play sports again. That's just typically what happens in situations like this, even if you do get a full recovery. But the fact he's going to be able to be a part of the team, I'm sure the team will keep him around some fashion for a long time. And he's going to be able to live his life, most likely, as he would have, pretty much, minus maybe his athletic achievements, is so good to hear. And it does make it a lot easier to talk about football right now. It makes it a lot easier to talk about him and his situation. And you mentioned with the fear with it, and I think the problem with it is this situation obviously was a freak situation. Like, he could get hit the same way 100,000 more times, and it's probably not going to happen again. But now that it has happened, human nature sets in, and now we have to wonder, like, oh, is it going to happen again? What if it does happen again? Are we going to get the same result? Is it going to turn out the same? It does, and I'm sure like NFL players looking around themselves right now, like, man, like, it just reminds you that even though it's very unlikely that will happen to you, this sport can take your life. It has the potential to do that. And it hasn't happened, other than, at least on the field, only one time back in the 70s. But we've seen the long-lasting effects of the sport. We all know that. Like, we're not blind to the fact that some people aren't going to get to live a full life after they play sports or play football, because there's going to be things that happen to them. And it's unfortunate, but at the same time, I know the players are going to be wanting to get back on the field, play for him, play for the situation that it is. And I'm hoping that he understands that, and he's excited about the prospect of Bills getting back out there. And you could tell, because the first thing he asked was who won the game, which of course, makes sense with Damar, just not surprising at all. So, but just glad to see that he's going to probably recover fully at this point, that we at least don't have to worry about him, not being able to return to his life at the very least, and definitely hoping to keep hearing more and more good things for his recovery moving forward. But so now that we covered that, I definitely want to make sure we start with that. Of course, that's the big news here. And also for any of you who might see this or watch this, if you haven't, donate to his charity if you can. You can find it all over Twitter, all over the internet right now. If you kind of just look up his situation, you can go ahead and direct, or you should donate directly to the charity at this point, because GoFundMe, as much as they've helped out, they do get a little bit of cut of things, of course, because they are a service. So donate directly to his charity if you can find it on the internet here. So,
and I will say, if you can't donate, I've seen a different way people have taken action, and there's a lot of local municipalities that will offer free CPR training courses if you can gather a large enough group of people. I would strongly encourage doing that. I know Joe Marino of the Locked On Bills podcast and the Draft Network. He lives nearby me. He lives in Concord, North Carolina. I'm more in Charlotte area, but he's organizing that with a bunch of listeners and a bunch of neighbors. And so that's another thing you can do. Everybody should go get trained. I'm going to go get trained. I think you never know when it's going to happen, and having the ability to not just be a bystander, but be there to help. I think it's something that everybody should do. So if you can't donate, then please donate your time and learn CPR. I think that's a really, really good, positive thing to take out of this incident.
Yeah, that's definitely a good point too, because there's so many times where people could possibly step in and help a situation like that if they were properly trained. Because obviously, not everybody's going to be able to be a doctor or a medical provider, whatever else. You can learn life-saving measures like that, especially CPR is the big one that you want to be able to know if you can. So definitely do that as well, everybody. I'm going to have to look into that maybe too. I know my girlfriend's CPR certified. She has to be. I wonder if she can maybe tell me how to get that taken care of, but I'll have to mention that to her as well. But next thing that we want to talk about is the playoff scenarios for Week 18. Of course, last week of the season, if you're going to get in, you got to do it now. And there's a lot that are pretty interesting here, because there's some teams that are just basically winning in. There's some that are barely hanging on, but pretty much need the whole world to fall apart around them to get in. So we'll definitely just kind of kick it off with some of the major ones. First of all, the one I want to start with, Jacksonville with the Titans game as well. That one is basically, again, you win and you're in. And other than a tie, Jacksonville will get the nod just because they have the better record in that case. But whoever wins this game, if there is a winner, is going to be the division title winner, which I can't believe I'm saying that. Going back to the offseason, I really expected that either the Colts, the Colts, or the Titans would, basically retain their crown, if nothing else. But Jacksonville came storming back, and Trevor Lawrence looks like one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL over the last half of the season. I obviously feel like, and we'll talk about this later as far as who's going to win this game, but I wouldn't be surprised, especially if it is Jacksonville that wins this game, if they could go on a little mini run. Maybe not anything too crazy, nothing like the Bengals last year, but I could see them taking a game, especially at home, in a home playoff game.
Yeah, I think Jacksonville is a team to not fear, because you either are playing Jacksonville or one of the Bills or Bengals, or so clearly Jacksonville's the choice there. But they are a team that can make noise in the playoffs. They've got a stud young quarterback. They've got exciting weapons. They got a beatable defense, but a fast defense. And I think in the playoffs that can equal just big plays, game-changing plays. So they're a team that is built to play spoiler to somebody, and I think that they are going to get into the playoffs. Even if they lose, which seems incredibly unlikely, they do still have a shot to get the 7th wild card spot.
Yes.
But I think Jacksonville is a team that can do some damage in the playoffs and play spoilers to one of these teams. And I don't think the same of the Titans. So I definitely would, for the sake of football, would like to see Jacksonville get the nod there.
Yeah, I definitely want to see that too. I mean, no offense to the Titans, they just right now they're kind of a mess, and they're
dog water. They've
lost is it 7 games in a row, 6 games now? I forget how many it is.
Something like that.
Yeah, it's just they're unfortunately a mess, and as much as I love Josh Dobbs as a former Steeler, I don't know if I want him starting in a win or go home game, basically. So we'll see how that plays out, but we'll talk about the actual scores and stuff later. But then we have a trio of AFC teams that basically have a situation where either they need just a win, they need win and help, or they need win and a lot of help. So looking at New England, if they win against the Bills, which tough, tough to ask that, but if they can, they're in. So it's a win and in situation. They also can get in if Miami loses, if Pittsburgh loses, and if Jacksonville wins. So basically, they have a pretty good chance here, I think, as long as they can take care of their own business. But that's easier said than done, because the Bills, while we're talking about that game, do also have something to play for. If Kansas City does lose to the Raiders, again, probably tough sledding there. But if they do and they win, they do get home field advantage throughout the AFC playoffs. So definitely something to keep in mind with them. What do you think with New England? Think they have any shot here, Tony? I know, obviously, as a Bills fan, you're probably hoping not, but do you think they have really any realistic chance here? Or is this pretty much you're hoping for other help?
Yeah, I mean, I think they have a shot. I think anytime you just have to win one game, any team has a shot in that sense. I think this Patriots team against this Bills team, it's hard to predict how the Bills are going to come out after such a traumatic emotional incident, just, on a short week. But it wouldn't be wrong if they fell flat and the Patriots get into the playoffs with a win, but it does feel it would be a surprise. And so I think the Patriots, while they do control their own destiny, they're probably the least likely team to snag that 7th spot, because they aren't a good team. They coach a good matchup defense, but it can be exploited. And I think we've seen the Bills in late season scenarios last year really exploit it. Mac Jones has taken a step back. The offense is gross. So I would be thoroughly shocked if the Patriots are the team that we see wild card weekend.
Yeah, it's tough sledding for them to get the win that they need, and then they need a lot of help from others then too, if that's the case. Speaking of which, Miami, they just need to win in a New England loss. So basically, they need to hope that the Bills, hold firm and they can get that win, which again, betting lines are telling you is probably going to happen, and then just be able to beat the Jets, which normally, if everybody's healthy for the Jets, I would actually think it's pretty unlikely, because Miami's currently starting Skylar Thompson at quarterback, which, no offense to him, not exactly Brock Purdying his way into relevance here. So basically, it's tough for Miami because I feel like they can get the New England loss, right? That's probably very likely. Getting a win against a Jets team who I'm sure is very eager to knock them out of the playoffs if given the opportunity, and that defense, and the fact that, yes, Joe Flacco's playing and not Mike White, but Joe Flacco is a veteran. He played decently well to start the season. I think he can operate this offense at a high enough level to give them the 20-ish plus points they need to win. Everything just kind of feels to me like Miami's it just everything cratered after that 8-3 start, and it's unfortunate for that team, especially because the Tua situation and everything else. But I just kind of feel like it's not their year after the hot start they had, and maybe next year, especially if Tua can get healthy, it's one thing. But I don't feel good about them winning this game and making the playoffs.
Yeah, I think the Miami Dolphins season is evidence of momentum. And I know all the very data analytics focused people, which I am inclined that way as well. There's no way to prove momentum statistically. But I think it's very real in situations like these, where a team that was at the top of tops, they were 8-3. They're first place in the AFC East, potentially even first place in the AFC. And then the wheels start to fall off. Injuries start to pile up. Your leader, your quarterback, goes down with a second concussion. And now you're cycling between your backups because of injuries. It just feels like an absolute momentum killer. And the direction of the team on this season, it doesn't lead to the playoffs. I think the Jets really laid it on him earlier in the season. And I think the Jets, while out of the playoffs themselves, are motivated to eliminate a divisional foe. And they are healthier. I think Joe Flacco probably more trustworthy in a weird game than Skylar Thompson is. So unfortunately for the Dolphins, I don't know if this is their year that they get to make the playoffs.
Yeah, and that takes me to my team, who I cannot believe I still have to talk about this late in the season after how we started. So we move on to Pittsburgh. They have a game against Cleveland, who does not have anything to play for. Now, they, of course, want to knock us out, but this is Cleveland we're talking about, and this is a different Steelers team than the one that played them earlier in the year. You could argue the same thing about the Browns, but maybe not even in a positive way, depending on who you ask. In general, again, everything is telling me that even though more things have to happen for the Steelers to make it than the other, the Patriots and the Dolphins, I just feel like they're going to get it done. If they win this game, I really feel like everything else is going to fall around them, and they're going to sneak in at 9-8. And I'm going to have to keep talking about them more. Which again, didn't necessarily want to have to do that this year because I don't think they necessarily deserve it. But I didn't think so last year either, and they made it. So what are you going to do? But you kind, I feel like you're kind of on the same page with me here. You kind of feel like that's probably where this is going.
Yeah, by process of elimination, I think you can see where I'm headed, but I agree. I think despite needing all that extra work out of other teams, it does feel like the Steelers are in the best position. As crazy as that is to say, I think they have found something Pickett has been developing despite his environment. And the game-winning drives he's been leading have been exciting. I don't think he's going to need a game-winning drive in this game. I think if it were the Jacoby Brissett Browns, I would not feel great for the Steelers, but it's not. Deshaun Watson hasn't looked good. The team hasn't looked like in unison yet, and I don't think they're going to solve that in 1 week to eliminate a foe. So I do think the Steelers have a very good chance to end up as the final wild card team, which is wild to think about. Just all credit to Mike Tomlin. I don't understand how he does it. I don't understand what magic he's working with, but goddamn, it works every single year.
It is just kind of ridiculous that I'm talking about this team again. We were 2-6 and then also 3-7 at one point. And I was ready for it. I'm like, you know what? We really need a losing season anyway. We need a good pick. Let's not give the front office a reason to be like, oh, we just need to add a piece or two and we're good. And of course, Mike's like, listen, that's all great and great and everything, but I don't lose. So sorry, maybe next year, probably not though. I do wonder how long he can keep it up because realistically, this team should be better next year in a lot of ways.
It should.
And obviously the rest of the
other teams should be getting worse as well.
In some situations, yes. Yeah. So I don't know when it's going to happen. I hope it doesn't at all, but it's kind of hard to expect that. But then again, it's been 15 years, so maybe I'm wrong about that. But yeah, it feels like that's what's going to happen. And then in the NFC, we'll move on to them. Pretty much there's a bunch of different scenarios for number 1 seed, number 2 seed, all that stuff. But mostly it's if the Eagles can win, they're set, and then the rest of the playoff field will kind of fall in line from there. San Francisco still has a chance. Dallas still has a chance for the number 1 seed. But again, if the Eagles can pull it out with or without Jalen Hurts against a Giants team who doesn't need to play their starters because they're locked in it, the 6th seed. I know that so far, weirdly enough, and this is important for any of you who might be betting, nobody seems to be saying that they're not going to play their starters for at least the start of the game. So keep that in mind. Even Giants who really have nothing to play for at this point in terms of seeding. So to keep that in mind. But the wild card situation is a little bit of a different story. So obviously there's Green Bay who somehow, because again, they're kind of in the same vein a little bit, not quite the same way, but they always find a way to factor in at the end here, even if they're having a bad season. They just need to win. If they can beat the Lions on Sunday Night Football, they're in. And if you'd have told me that 4 weeks ago, especially the way the Lions themselves were playing, I would have told you're full of crap. But again, here we are, right? So they're going to have a chance to control their destiny. Seattle can also still get in with the Geno Smith, resurgent year still going strong right now. If they can beat the Rams and the Lions can beat Green Bay, they actually get in over the Lions because they're head-to-head win in that crazy, 90-plus point scoring game that they had earlier. And the Lions, unfortunately, for as well as they've played in the back half of the year, they need some help. They need Seattle to lose to the Rams, which it's the Rams. I don't know if that's because they actually have something to play for Seattle. I don't think that's going to happen, but we'll talk about that a little bit more later. Detroit, I'd love to see them get in, but looking at this, I feel like it's Green Bay. That's the team that's going to do this. I think they're going to find a way to pull it out, and Aaron Rodgers is going to laugh at all of us from his seat and Pat McAfee show. That's what's going to happen. That's what we're going to have to deal with. And honestly, as much of a Rodgers fan as I have been in the past, I'm kind of tired of his face. Just going to throw that out there. I'm kind of tired of hearing him, but this is what we get. He's probably going to be him in the wild card round.
Yeah, unfortunately for you, I don't think you're going to be done seeing his face this year.
I don't think so either.
So you said if you told me 4 weeks ago that the Packers would have a win and in situation in this week, you would have called them crazy. I would like to say 4 weeks ago on this show, potentially even 4 weeks to the day, I did say I saw a disaster scenario for the Lions where they win enough games to be in the hunt in week 18.
Mm-hmm.
The Packers win enough games
I
and
do
it's a
remember
win and
that,
in
yeah.
situation and the Packers win. And I am so sorry. I have many Lions fan friends, and I am terribly sorry for speaking that into the universe and making it happen. Apparently,
Yeah, it's your
I'm going to
fault,
go
Tony.
speak
I
some
don't.
lottery numbers into the universe next.
You should,
But
yeah.
it does feel like that's what we've built to, and I think there has been a change in this Packers team, and I think it comes from Aaron Rodgers. So defensively, we've seen Joe Barry pull off some schematic wins, like the way he shut down the Vikings. I don't think that's who he is. I think he's still the defensive coordinator that calls that soft vanilla shit that gets them in trouble and gets 200 yards to Justin Jefferson. But if he can string together more games like they did last week and the week before, then we see a playoff caliber defense. And then the real resurgence has been on offense. They figured out the run game, and that's been so important because now Aaron Rodgers looks comfortable. It looks like he has something to fall back on, and he's like happy playing again. So now he's elevating his receivers, his teammates, and the offense is clicking. They look primed and ready, and honestly, they look kind of scary. Like if you're talking the 2 seed Minnesota Vikings getting the Packers, I think that's a disaster scenario for that. Okay, it's a disaster for anybody they play because the Vikings aren't that good. But this is a team that can go and win playoff games on the road, I think, because of how they're built. And it does feel like they're going to get the spot. I think the Lions or the Seahawks would also be able to make some noise, but they just feel less reliable, as crazy as it is to say after this very long season.
Yeah, and I totally agree with that because you look at Green Bay right now, they are one of those teams that because of the way that they're winning right now and the fact that they do have Aaron Rodgers for those big moments if they need them, they are very scared because this is the last time that the Packers won a title and the only time they've won one with Aaron was when they kind of snuck in at the end and went on a run. Now, it's a little bit different. I don't think they have the same firepower offensively that they had in that
No.
time, and the defense, while really talented, probably isn't the same level of defense they had that year either. But with the right scenario, and like if you can get to a situation where maybe you play Dallas in a big game, or you play, someone like obviously the Vikings would be who they could possibly play in the first round. Like you can win those games. Like those teams are very beatable. Even the top teams in the NFC, like San Francisco, looks like they're just storming through the league right now. But they had needed overtime against the Raiders. Like all these teams in the NFC, even the Eagles, especially if Hurts isn't like 100%, they're beatable this year. And I'm more concerned about who can match up with whoever wins the AFC. But at this point, like if you're in the NFC, you can't feel comfortable, even in the top seeds with how the wild card field is right now. Like you shouldn't feel super comfortable about it. So it's definitely gonna be interesting to see how that plays out. I do expect it to be Green Bay, and we'll talk about our predictions for the week here in a minute, but I do expect it to be them. And if I would love to see the Lions make it, just because Dan Campbell is the coolest person that could make the playoffs at this point, that isn't in it. So I'd like to see him do that. But if it doesn't happen this year, I think that their chances next year are going to be even better. So, but
Absolutely.
yeah, before we move into the game predictions, which we're going to do in a second, I do want to just mention this because it feels more and more like this is what's happening. I do wonder, Lamar Jackson is not playing this week, so we're going to throw that out. The Ravens in a game where they do still have technically something to play for to a certain degree as far as seeding goes, I believe. That whole situation is kind of murky because of the NFL's decision on like the Bills-Bengals game has kind of made it weird. Point being, if they win, I know and I believe the Chargers win as well. I think that at that point, it's a coin toss to determine who would be home field advantage for a playoff game between the Bengals and Ravens. I think that's what the situation is, if I read it correctly.
Yes.
So it's a little weird, but basically this is a game that does matter to a certain degree for the Ravens, and it also just would be nice to see Lamar play before the playoffs. And the fact that he's not either tells me his injury is more serious than they said it was, or he's basically said that until I am like 110% sure that I am myself, you're not getting anything out of me. And if that's the case, again, this whole situation is so weird because I don't know why the Ravens have let it play out to this point. And I understand he doesn't have an agent. He's working with it himself. He doesn't like the contracts they've given so far. But this is a guy who you have literally done everything you can to build an offense around him, despite the fact that you failed, in my opinion, to elevate an offense around him. I think that you rely too much on his skill set and try to lean so far into it, you actually go too far. But they've built this team in a way that no one other than him can actually run it to a elite level. Like, you can have quarterbacks that are really athletic, like Tyler Huntley, come in and run the offense, but they've scored, I think, like 14 points a game without him. Like, it
Yeah,
just
it's
it
not been
doesn't.
good.
Yeah, it doesn't work the same. And obviously, they're missing weapons, they're missing receivers, all that stuff, whatever. Lamar's still able to get it done enough where, like, the defense could still be a big factor in the game plan. And they're sitting at 2-2 without him right now, which honestly is better than I would have thought they would be, considering how bad the offense was looking with him, let alone without him. But again, like, they needed a big win against the Steelers last week, and they couldn't get it done against a team that scored, again, 13 points. Like, at some point, you have to look at it and go, he is the offense, he's everything for this team. How much does it take to get you to sign? Like, that's really what the question is. It doesn't matter what that number really is, in my opinion, because if the alternative is you completely scrap your entire offensive identity next year and you find a quarterback that isn't Lamar Jackson, and you're not going to find somebody to run the Lamar Jackson offense, not in this class. You could look at maybe like an Anthony Richardson, but again, are you going to be able to draft him? I don't even know what his draft status is going to look like by the time the draft comes around. It's too much unknown for me for a Ravens team that has thrived off consistency in the similar ways that the Steelers have for the past 15 years. And I do wonder at this point, does he want to be there? Because it doesn't sound like it from everything you hear. And of course, we could be overblowing it, and it could be simply that he just isn't healthy enough to play. And, like, but if that's the case, that's a problem then too, because if you go into the playoffs next week and he's still not 100%, you're not beating anybody. I'm sorry, you're not beating anyone in the playoffs without him, and you're just not going to. It's been hard enough even with him, just because of the limitations the offense has, because they don't have anybody who can actually play receiver right now. But it's going to be 10 times harder without him, because at least with him, you have the potential for something insane to happen, because he can just make it happen. So I'm curious what you think about this. Like, do you think he actually wants to come back this year? Do you think he even wants to be a Raven past this year? Or do you think he's trying to find an exit strategy at this point?
In a way, yes to all three. I think he does want to come back this year. I think he wants to compete. I think he knows his team is in the playoffs and he wants to compete. I think the reason that he might not play this game tomorrow is that because of the no contest on Monday night, the Ravens were eliminated from contention for the AFC North crown.
Yeah, the division. Yeah.
So even though in a wonky scenario where they get the win this week and then a coin flip decides home field, they feel pretty out of the home field side of things. And so I think they're looking at this like, we can play to win. We can play Lamar when he's not 100%, try to win, but we're unlikely to win that game. And even if we do, it's a 50-50 chance to get home field. So I think what they're doing is they're just taking the consolation. They're saying, all right, we're going to lose. We're not going to risk Lamar. We're going to let him get another week of rest so that he's 100% healthy when we play our away playoff game. And so I think that's a conscious decision they're making. So I think he wants to return, but I think they're being responsible about it, because this week, even though there's still a small chance they can get the home field, I don't think they do. And I think they see
it's hard. Yeah, it's hard.
Then do I think that he wants to be there past this year? No. I think he loves his teammates. I think he loves his head coach. I think he doesn't quite love how the front office and the offensive coaching staff have dictated his career to this point. I think there's a lot of meat left on the bone because of how they've built this thing. And because of the contract situation, I think that's given him all he needs to say, okay, I'm going to just make it work somewhere else. I think he loves the city, loves the fans. And if Baltimore this offseason is like, hey, we were wrong, we messed up, here's your fully guaranteed contract, we're going to build around you, he'd sign it. But that's probably not what's going to happen. And I think he's ultimately going to ask to leave, just because of the way they've designed things around him, and really the lack of way they've designed things around him. And then the last question, I forget, but that I feel like
basically, do you think he's looking for an exit strategy in the offseason? Do you think he's trying to maneuver himself in a position to get to another team as early as next offseason?
Yeah, I do think that. So like that goes hand in hand with, I think if he gets the offer that he wants, he'll accept. But I think everybody knows he's not getting that, and as such, he's going to start to posture. He's going to play his heart out in the playoff game, I'm sure. But he is going to, then offseason hits, he's going to start working with teams and asking permission to get to talk trade and all that jazz. And I think that he's going to be looking out for himself because the team hasn't really done so to this point.
I do want to ask one more thing about this, because I'm sure we'll talk more about this as we get into the offseason, because I do want to try to keep up the show for anyone watching for, NFL offseason stuff. But for me, I think the question the Ravens have to ask themselves at this point, and Lamar has to ask himself, is it more likely for, if you're the Ravens, if you could get an absolute haul for him, right? Which, of course, I think you could, to the right team. We already saw what Russell Wilson, how that worked out, unfortunately, for the Broncos, but I don't think that's going to scare teams off.
Well, Lamar Jackson's actually good, so that won't be an issue.
That's my point. But, I don't think that'll scare people off, despite the fact that, he has had some injury issues and stuff like that the past couple of years. But if you're the Ravens and you aren't willing to pay him the money he wants, and your offense isn't working even with him in there because you can't seem to build the offense the way that you want to build it with him, which, again, I think that they just need to build the offense relatively traditionally, except for emphasis on some extra tight ends. If you do that.
Oh, no, I go the opposite. Fine. Go spread.
But I'm saying, you can have all your extra tight ends in that, kind of hybrid spread system, but you have to find legitimate outside receiving talent.
Yes.
Because that's how you allow him to develop even more as a passer and show off his development as a passer. Because when he's gotten the opportunity to do that in the past couple of years, he's shown that. So if you're willing to commit to that, if you can find, whether it's free agency, getting established receivers, hopefully Rashad Bateman's healthy, do you lean into that and continue to do that? Or do you look at the writing on the wall and say, okay, we have failed to build the offense around him properly. This weird hybrid system we're trying to run hasn't worked out fully since his MVP year. Do we kind of cut our losses and try to completely rebuild the offense from the ground up and find someone else and let him go and succeed elsewhere possibly? And if you're the Ravens, or excuse me, Lamar, then too, do you think the best chance for your career to continue to get better and further on is that somewhere else other than the Ravens, despite their willingness to try to put you into a situation they think is best for you?
Yeah, I think we have 4 or 5 years of evidence on what the Ravens are willing to do to help Lamar in his career, and I think he is a very smart man in that he knows what he's worth and he knows what he can do. And so I think he sees other teams as an expressway to competitiveness, basically, and the best place for his career. I think if you drop him in Atlanta or Detroit or New York or Miami, either New York team, that is, that you see improvement. And I think his situation improves, his career improves. So I think he's very tuned into where is best for him to be. And so he's going to take the offer if it comes from the Ravens. Otherwise, I think he's fully going to push to go elsewhere because there are greener pastures.
That's actually what I was going to say is I feel like if you were Lamar Jackson, right, and obviously we aren't, and we're not going to be, we're not going to ever have to make this decision. If you had the opportunity in the offseason, right, your opportunities were either you stay with the Ravens for a 5-year deal that's like $250-ish million, but not fully guaranteed because they just won't do it, or push a trade to the Jets. We'll use as an example. Obviously, I know you probably don't want to have to deal with that, but
no, that makes me sad.
If you were Lamar and you had the opportunity to go to the Jets, now granted they'd have to give up a lot for you, but assuming you keep the offense pretty much entirely intact, you have Hall coming back at running back, you have Garrett Wilson, you have other receiving talents there. The offensive line, despite being decimated pretty much most of the year, was still pretty decent most of the year. Hopefully you get those guys to come back. Which would you rather take, especially if the deal was going to be basically the same? Maybe it's a little bit better with the Jets because they're trading for you. They know they kind of have to relinquish some of what they might want to do with the deal. Which would you choose at that point, you think?
So I have the benefit of no emotional attachments, right?
Right, exactly.
I have the benefit of not being in Lamar's head, and I can make the objectively better decision and say
that's why
it is much better to go to the New York Jets in that scenario. Now, the bonds that he has built with the city, with his teammates, I think he is a man who believes in that and honors that. And I think he would like to stay in Baltimore for those reasons. I'm sure he's a guy who would like to play for one city, one team his entire life. But so I could see him taking a very strong deal from the Ravens, but I don't think he's going to get that. And I do think if the Jets were in conversations with him and saying, hey, we're going to trade 3 first-round picks and a couple defensive players, and we're going to give you a 5-year, $250 million fully guaranteed, like, yeah, he's going to take that in a heartbeat.
Yeah, that's my thing with it is I think like the Ravens have to decide right now, basically, like next year at the latest, are they going to hitch their wagon to him for 5+ years and fully guarantee his contract? Because if they're not going to do that, I don't think that he needs to be on the team. I think Lamar knows that. I think they know that. Like if they're not willing to make that investment, because again, the quarterback landscape, and this is really the important thing, is right now contracts are obviously not fully guaranteed for most quarterbacks. Really, it's only 2 technically. Kirk Cousins somehow continues to get fully guaranteed contracts, year after year, just because it's like a year or 2 at a time. But Deshaun Watson's deal obviously kind of threw a wrench in things to a certain degree. People were trying to say like, oh, well, that doesn't set a precedent. I'm like, yes, it does. You can't look at Lamar Jackson and say, hey, we know how good you are, and also you aren't credibly accused of sexual assault by a million people. You can't have his contract. Like, you can't say that to him without him being able to say, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, okay. Like, you can't do it. And granted, that's not your fault. That was the Browns' fault. But that's what's going to happen. And I think the same thing is going to happen with possibly Joe Burrow, Justin Herbert. These other guys are coming up for contracts. Like, they're going to be able to say, their agents are going to say, hey, you see that deal in Cleveland? Yeah, I want that, but better. Like, that's what they're going to be able to do. And maybe teams won't relent on that, but they're going to have the right to do so. It's going to be really interesting to see how that kind of plays out over the next couple of years.
Some team will be willing if it's Lamar Jackson.
Yes.
Like,
they will. And those other guys too, but yeah.
This season has done maybe some damage to like the overall fan perspective of Lamar Jackson, but
yeah, but the NFL,
he was playing his best football, like passing wise this season, despite all the shit surroundings. And NFL teams are going to be very excited at the opportunity to pay him whatever he wants if he hits, if he's on the trade market.
Exactly. Yeah. So I think if you're Lamar, you're in a pretty good spot regardless, but we'll see. But let's jump into the games. We're going to try to focus on the ones that are really important, of course, but don't want to take too much time with that. So first game, it's going to be at 4:30 today. We got the KC at Las Vegas situation or game. This one, the line is +8.5. I feel like obviously KC dominates Las Vegas typically, so I get why, but I can see this game being kind of closer just because of the circumstances where KC might not have to put the gas on if they get a lead early on. They might be able to kind of sit guys for a little bit. So what do you think on the score for this one?
So I don't remember the exact score, but when they played in week 5, I want to say it was a 3-point game.
Yes,
and
they did play them
was
close, actually.
A failed comeback effort by Derek Carr and the Raiders in a very tight game. And you know what? These Raiders play these Chiefs close. It's just a way of life. So I think the door is open for an upset. And we've seen the way the Chiefs have played in the past 3 or 4 weeks where they've really stumbled through it. They've almost lost to the Broncos a couple times. They got taken to overtime by the Texans. They're not firing on all cylinders right now, despite Mahomes firing on all cylinders, which is
the defense has been interesting. Yeah.
It's been bad. And so like, looking forward, if the defense turns it on and Mahomes stays on this hot streak, just give them the Lombardi right now. But if Mahomes maybe pressure gets to him or something, and the defense doesn't step up and the rest of the team plays the way they've been playing, they are upset perceptible. It's not something that's out of the realm of possibilities. I do have Kansas City winning, but a tight one. I have them winning 28-24. I think the Raiders can keep it close. I think Stidham is running that offense very just robotically, and that's something Carr wasn't really able or maybe willing to do because he has experience. He's like, I know how to run a damn offense. Let me do my thing. And that doesn't gel well with McDaniels. So I think it's going to be close, but ultimately the Chiefs outlast them. They have experience. They feel like this is a playoff kind of environment because of what's at stake, and I think they get it done at the end.
Yeah, and it's actually funny. I also have 28-24 Kansas City, so I think we're pretty much on the same page. I do think that, again, they'll be able to pull it out. There's a better team, and as much as Stidham was really good last week, I do wonder, like, because there's already people talking about, like, oh, he should get the chance to be the starter for the Raiders next year. And also, I'm like, we always do this with guys. Like, in no offense, Jarrett Stidham, I actually didn't hate him when he was coming out of college from Auburn. Like, I don't hate him as a player, but, like, he's going to do what McDaniels wants him to do, and when you do that, you're probably going to be semi-successful. But I don't expect that to continue, obviously, and maybe even this week he'll still play well. But let's bump the brakes on these quarterbacks when they get their first start. Let me just say that. So yeah, I'll take Kansas City in that one, and then we have Tennessee at Jacksonville, -6 for Jacksonville. Definitely heavy favorites in this game for good reason, obviously. But again, the the AFC South is just a mess, right? Like the same thing, like the South divisions this year, man. Like we could just pretend they don't exist if we really wanted to. At least Jacksonville, they've been fun lately, so like I'll give them that. But just kind of tough to watch. So what do you think for this one, Jacksonville, Tennessee?
Yeah, man, I like this Jacksonville team. They're fun.
They're fun.
I like Trevor Lawrence. I love Doug Peterson. That's just an amazing hire. Like, well done. Pulling in the perfect guy for Trevor Lawrence. That's going to be a pairing to be afraid of for a while. I don't understand why the line is 6. That doesn't make sense. The Titans are terrible. Josh Dobbs is not good. Love the guy, not good.
Yeah.
I've lost so much faith in Vrabel through this whole pushing John Robinson out and then immediately, like, I don't know, just things being awful and ugly. And I no longer have confidence in them to make games ugly and win them ugly like they have in years past. I have the Jags winning 41-13. I think it's going to be a steamrolling. I think the Jags are going to make a statement and say, this is our division. We're not letting go of it anytime soon. All of you other teams, enjoy your misery. And it's the era of the Jags in the AFC South, and it's fun.
I like that prediction for sure. I do think it's going to be a little bit of a closer game just because as much as Vrabel has lost a little bit of confidence on my end too, he still has the opportunity here to at least make this a game. And I think that Dobbs played well enough against the Cowboys to make me think that like it's not going to be a bloodbath by any means. For me, it's just going to come down to Jacksonville's just more talented team right now, and they're playing better, and especially the past 7 weeks or so. I'll take 27-20 Jacksonville. It could end up getting uglier than that, but I think that the Titans, especially with Henry back, he'll be able to at least do enough to kind of make it close. But Trevor Lawrence is the best quarterback in the game, and they have the better offense. I'll take them in that game. Then we move on to Sunday. So only 2 games on Saturday, but it's definitely the Tennessee and Jacksonville game, a big one at the very least. So Sunday, start off New England at Buffalo. Again, we kind of already talked about the playoff scenarios. So you probably kind of know where we're both going as far as predictions on who's going to win. But I'll actually kick it off with this one. I have Buffalo 28-17. I think that they're going to punch them in the mouth early, kind of get them down, and then maybe New England can get a touchdown near the end of the game or something like that to make it look a little bit better. But this Buffalo team has a lot to play for still, with the number 1 seed still potentially there for them, and home field in the playoffs. And more importantly, this is the game directly after, obviously, what happened with Damar Hamlin. I expect them to come out fired up and wanting to just destroy the Patriots. I wanted to make it even worse of a game, but I feel like they might be able to pull some guys at the end if they want to.
Yeah, I'm pretty in line with what you're thinking there. I have the Bills winning 28-7, so similar. I think they are going to be very emotional, but getting the FaceTime from Damar Hamlin, it turns that it channels that emotion. I think they're ready to play football now, whereas had they not received all this positive news, I don't know if we're talking about this game getting played at all. So the fact that they're ready and willing to go out there and play this game tells me all I need to know about how it's going to go. I think the potential for more points than 28 is there, but it is something where, like, yeah, you get up big enough and that they're not coming back. You just start to run the ball, try to figure out your run game and more as you go into the postseason. So in a smooth Bills win, I'd say.
Yeah, for sure. Moving on, Houston at Indianapolis means absolutely nothing except for draft status and draft positioning, which that's always what really matters, right? Is draft positioning. Now, I think that actually, even though it's at Indianapolis for Houston and the situation, I think for me, I'm going to take Houston 21-14. The Colts are terrible, and there's a lot of reasons why. And I just feel like they deserve to lose. That's basically where I'm at with this. I think they deserve every loss they get. The fact that Jeff Saturday is the coach of this team, we already talked about it being kind of ridiculous whenever it happened, and it's proven true. Where they've lost, I think it's 3 or 4 games by 17 plus since he's become the head coach, something like that. I forget exactly the number, but
something like that.
We all know the Minnesota game too, which I still don't believe actually happened. But only the Colts, coached by Jeff Saturday, could allow a Kirk Cousins Vikings team to do what they did. So I will say that. Again, I just feel like Houston, they're not good either, but at least for them, like I have hope for them in the future. With the Colts right now, I really don't know what you look at and go, man, we're going to be in good shape next year. It's tough to look at that. So
Yeah, this game just does not matter. I do think Houston's going to fumble the bag and lose the first
right.
overall pick,
That's a good point. But yeah, that'd
because
be fun if
the Colts are just that bad. They're two terrible teams, and I'm going to side with Lovie Smith over Jeff Saturday. So I have Houston winning 27-21 in overtime. I mean,
fun.
like it's going to just be dumb. It's going to be dumb football, but
I bet
sometimes that's fun.
Yeah, for sure. Especially the last game of the year, just trying to have some fun. Minnesota at Chicago. If Justin Fields was playing, I might care about this game a little bit just because it'd be fun to watch a little bit. Nathan Peterman's playing. Tony, I don't need to remind you who Nathan Peterman is. I know you're very familiar. So that's not going to probably be not going to probably be great. But it might be funny, if nothing else. So I will say for this game, I'll start again 27-14 Minnesota. I'll give 14 points just because I feel like Minnesota's defense isn't that great anyway. And like Peterman will just show enough to make you think, oh, that's right. He was like okay in the preseason that one time. Yeah, it's not too bad. But that's pretty much all it's going to be for me, I think.
Yeah. So I think Nathan Peterman's going to throw a few touchdowns. I only have the Bears winning or scoring points though. So do the math there. I have the Vikings winning 34-3, 2 pick sixes at least.
Yeah.
I've seen Nathan Peterman throw a football before. This is going to be very funny. It speaks more to the Bears than the Vikings, but the Bears get their first overall pick and the Vikings maybe lock up the 2 seed. I think that would mean, which is disastrous for them, but there's really no other result. It's unavoidable.
Yeah, it's going to happen, right? You think? Because like the Packers going
Yes.
to Minnesota and beating them is the funniest thing that could possibly happen in the first round of the playoffs.
Yes, we are going to see that happen.
Probably. So next, Baltimore at Cincinnati. Cincinnati heavy favorites, mostly because, again, Tyler Huntley's playing quarterback and not Lamar Jackson, and they looked really good up until what happened in their game against the Bills, obviously. What do you think for this one?
Yeah, I think Cincinnati's not willing to leave any doubt. I know they're all pretty pissed off about how the NFL decided to approach things after the no contest, and there are some reasonable gripes. I do think maybe those fans are overlooking the fact that they did get gifted the division.
True.
But I understand they had a 1 seed that they were in contention for, and that got taken away from them. So I would be pissed as well. I would be upset, but I think they're going to leave no doubt here. They're not going to leave anything up to a coin flip. They're going to go out there and win and win hard. And it's going to be 28-10. They're going to lay off the gas once they're up big. But this is it's going to make things easier in terms of stomaching how the NFL approached all their decisions.
Yeah, I think it's very likely you're going to see something like that. I have 31-17 Cincinnati, very similar to you. They're just a better football team right now in general. Even with Lamar Jackson, they're probably still at least a little bit better, especially with how they played down the stretch of the season. So kind of have to give them the benefit of the doubt there. New York Jets at Miami. You already know how I feel about this. I know how you feel about this in terms of who's going to win. But I'm curious to see what kind of score you're looking at here. So I'll let you go first here, Tony.
Yeah, I got to say, I was shocked to see that Miami were still 3.5 point favorites. It doesn't really make a whole lot of sense to me given where these teams' strengths are and where their weaknesses are and the quarterback situation. I have the Jets winning 23-14, and I just think that Flacco knows how to get the ball in the hands of his playmakers quickly. So we're going to see Garrett Wilson, Elijah Moore, all those guys have good days. And the Dolphins, like we said earlier, are just kind of stumbling and collapsing. And Skylar Thompson against this defense, I don't think he's going to be able to make much happen.
Yeah, it's just hard. I mean, for Miami, like I think that honestly, this is probably the best thing that can happen to them, though, in my opinion, is to lose this game because they need some wholesale changes on defense, and they also I don't think they can do anything in the playoffs unless Tua can come back, right? And we don't know what his status is at this point. Like if he'd be healthy enough to play next week, then maybe making the playoffs is worth it just to try to see if you can go on a run. But this defense is not good. The offense has been out of sorts, even before Tua got hurt again. Like it wasn't quite the same. I think they need a reset in the offseason. I think that they found a lot of things that will work moving forward, but it's got to figure it out defensively and add some more talent to that team. And I think they'll be in a better position next year. So I do have 20-17 Jets at this point. I think that, like you said, Flacco will do enough. He doesn't have to do a lot probably if that defense can put Skylar Thompson in hell, which they already done it one time in the last game whenever he had to come in. So I'm sure they can do it again. Carolina at New Orleans. Again, this game I was hoping would matter a little bit, but just because I didn't want to see Tampa have to get a freaking home playoff game or whatever. Not really anything to play for at this point for either of these teams, so it's more just a pride thing. I'm going to give the edge 21-18 to Carolina. I think that Steve Wilkes has more to play for than Dennis Allen does at this point. I think he wants to prove that he is going to be the guy that's going to be the right decision for head coach next year with this team. And I honestly hope he gets it. I think he did a really good job overall considering the circumstances.
I completely agree. And that's the same. I picked Carolina to win 24-17. And I think it's because these Panthers love their head coach and they want to make a statement to the owner saying, keep this guy and we'll play hard. So it's a meaningless game. Players on both sides don't really have much to play for. So the fact that the Carolina Panthers are playing for their head coach tells me that they're going to win.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at with it too. Tampa Bay at Atlanta. Atlanta -4. I assume that's probably because they expect Tampa to pull their starters at some point, which that's definitely possible. But it sounds like they want to keep it going and not lose any possible momentum. Just because last week, especially, I mean, Mike Evans, Tom Brady, like they were just on fire. I think they want to try to keep that going. So, what do you think on the score for this one?
Yeah, and I was surprised in the same way by that line. I don't think that the Bucks are going to rest their guys. Now, I can very quickly be proven wrong on that, and my score prediction throw it out the window. But the Bucks are kind of surging. Their offense is clicking, their defense playing better, and I think they want to carry that momentum into the playoffs. They seem kind of old school, especially with Todd Bowles, where it's like, no, I'm not resting my starters. I want to continue momentum. And so I think we're going to see them coming out firing. And so I have them winning 28-13. Brady plays most of the full game and just continues to get into that rhythm with Evans. And he's been tossing 60-yard bombs to him in all season, and they just haven't been hitting. So he wants to keep that alive. And they're going to be a hot team in the playoffs. I would not want to be the Cowboys having.
You're telling me that the Tampa Bay Buccaneers with Tom Brady is going to be a hot team in the playoffs? Who would have thought
I'm telling
that?
you.
Who would
I'm
have
telling
thought
you
that?
that we are going to see a vintage Brady Rodgers NFC championship game.
Listen to me. I'm just going to say this right now because I've talked about it all year. We all knew that because the South refused to oblige, that no matter how bad Tampa is, that they were going to find a way to go on like a 3-game win streak at the end of the year and get in the playoffs. Everybody's going to get healthy, and the defense is going to figure it out. And Tom Brady's going to be playing good again, and we're going to have to deal with his ass in the playoffs again. And of course, that's what happened. So I will take Tampa as well, but I'll say 24-20. I think it'll be a little bit of a closer game. I think that, honestly, Tampa just still isn't that great. I don't expect them to go on a huge hot streak in terms of like stuff we've seen last year on offense and stuff like that. And I think just honestly, Atlanta is a kind of a tough team to play just because they run the ball so well and they do things on defense better recently. Like it's going to still probably be Tampa pulling out if they do play their starters, but I think it'll be roughly about a 4 or 5 point game. Cleveland at Pittsburgh. Now, I may be at this game. Just going to throw that out there. I don't know yet at this point. It's possible that I'm going to be there. It depends on something I have to find out later. But if I am, all I'm going to say is they better wait 10, 15 minutes more for the game to start than they're supposed to, just by technical issues or something. Because I want to know in the fourth quarter the result of the other 2 games. Because if we know the other 2 games that has to happen for us to have a chance, if we know the result of them with any amount of time left, that stadium is going to freaking lose their minds, and I want to see that. But besides that point, you already know I have Pittsburgh winning 24-20. I think that they'll be able to do just enough offensively, and the defense will be able to stop Watson enough to make it really difficult for them to lean on the run game, especially because that's what they really want to do, obviously. I think our run defense has improved recently. Even though the Ravens averaged a decent amount of yards per carry, they weren't very effective in short yardage and things like that. So I do think we'll be able to pull that game out.
Yeah, I'm in agreement. I have Pittsburgh winning 20-17. I think that the Steelers just understand where they're at, and they have a head coach who understands where they're at, and they're not going to let this game get away from them. And the Browns don't have much firepower or anything to play for, really. So I think the Steelers win this, and based off of my predictions, that does put them in the playoffs.
Yeah, which again, can't believe I'm talking about that, but I'm going to be talking about it on Wednesday next week with my Steelers podcast. I'm sure I'll be just sitting there like, what are we doing, guys? How do we get here? But Rams at Seattle. I do have Seattle winning 27-20. I think that they're going to put themselves in position to basically have to hope the Lions still care more about taking the Packers out of the playoffs than they care about taking Seattle out of the playoffs. But I do think they hold up their end of the bargain. And unfortunately for the Lions, kind of make their game less, something they have to even think about too much, unfortunately. But I just don't see the Rams being able to beat the Seattle team that has something to play for. They're just not good this year for a lot of reasons. And Geno Smith just unbelievably has been one of the better quarterbacks in the NFL this year.
So I think, and now this is where I am just so eternally sorry to all the Lions fans. I think hope is given in this 4:00 slate.
Oh, no.
I think that the Rams pull it off.
Baker Mayfield, man. Let's do it.
This Seahawks team is a tale of two Genos.
Yeah.
There is world-burning Geno, who is truly like, there was a stretch of games where he belonged in the MVP conversation. That's how good he was. And that's how good he can be in any specific game. So that could come out. But then there's also like regress to like mediocre Geno. And that requires lift from the defense. That requires lift from the playmakers, from the running game. And I just don't know if that gets there. These teams always play a weird game. The offense for the Rams, they've kind of figured it out, and they figured out the run game with Cam Akers really exploding down the stretch here. And the Seahawks defense has been bad against the run lately, and they've kind of like fallen back into their true colors on that front after a pretty good midseason stretch. So I do think Akers puts the team on his back and wins this game 24-20, and opens the door for a really exciting Sunday night football game.
That's going to be really sad if you're the Lions, if it goes the way I know you're going to pick later. But that's even worse, because like at least with my pick, they know like, all right, we're just going to try to knock the Packers out of the playoffs. Having the hope is the worst way that a Lions fan can feel in that moment. But we'll get to them in a little bit here. Chargers at Denver. Man, so Denver's looked a little bit better recently, right? A little bit. I don't know how much better Russell Wilson truly has looked, but like they look a little bit better. But even though the Chargers really don't have a lot to play for here, and really anyway, they're already in the playoffs, are good there. I can't pick Denver. I can't do it. I know they're -3. I got 24-16 Chargers because I think the Broncos will score 16 points, as they really love to do this year still. That just kind of feels right to me. I think the Chargers are on a hot streak right now. I think the defense has really improved since guys have come back, and I'll just take the better quarterback in this game.
So I think the Chargers are gonna be pretty conservative with their players. We've come to understand what charging is, and we understand how the health of that team plays into it. And I think they're going to be cautious. So I don't know how much we're going to see of Herbert, Allen, Williams, Eckler. I think those guys are going to maybe play a series or so, like treat it like a preseason game, because ultimately the result of this game doesn't matter much to them. We're not expecting the Ravens to win, which means that they have the 5 seed locked up no matter what. And I think they're just going to kind of be on to Jacksonville at that point. And so I have Denver winning 19-14 because they do have a little bit more to play for, not in terms of like playoffs, but just in terms of they are tied to Russell Wilson for a damn long time. And Russell finally started to look good last week. And so I think they're going to come out and offensively just like execute a bit better than they had previously been and do enough. And then the Chargers offense is just going to be flat because it's going to be whatever backup quarterback they have.
Chase Daniel. I actually think that even if Chase Daniel plays a lot of the game, which I actually have a weird feeling that Staley's going to want to see his offense play for a while and his defense. It doesn't make sense, but again, it feels like no one's talking about resting their starters, like none, literally at all. And maybe that's just them trying to not like give away stuff, but it feels like this week we're going to see a lot of guys play most of the week. But even if he doesn't, it'd be really funny to see Chase Daniel go out there and drop like 3 bombs on Denver. I think it'd be very funny. I'm not expecting it, but it'd be funny.
It'd be good content.
Oh, for sure. We'd be talking about Chase Daniel was stealing money for a decade and then all of a sudden does well. He's the ultimate like backup quarterback, dude. Like no one's done that job better than anybody. But Giants at Philly. No line posted unless it's changed. I don't know if we've gotten any update on that. I haven't checked myself, but I guess it's because of the Hurts. They don't know if he's playing situation. I don't know. But regardless, I do think that I'm going to give this game to Philly 24-21. I just think that they want to lock up this number 1 seed. The Giants don't have anything to play for. They are the 6th seed no matter what happens, and I do think they're the most likely team to rest a lot of their players, especially like Daniel Jones. They don't want to see him get hurt. They don't want to see Saquon Barkley get banged up at all. So I do expect that to be the case where they kind of just concede at some point and let Philly kind of get the number 1 seed and move on from there.
Yeah, I agree. I think the line hasn't been posted just because of the questions around, are the Eagles going all out? Because we know we are pretty aware that the Giants are resting their starters. I think that's been at least rumored heavily.
Yeah, Daboll's basically said that it's a good chance we might see some guys, not play a whole lot. So, yeah.
And that plays. That's how the Bills approach things. So, I'm not surprised to see that from them. So, I have the Eagles winning 30-12. I think they know they're playing to win, and maybe Minshew gets to play another quarter because things are just so locked up. But I think they are motivated to win, and the Giants are motivated to survive, and the game's going to tell that story.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. Arizona at San Francisco. So San Francisco does have something to play for. They can still get the number 1 seed if nothing's happened around them. And Arizona is starting David Blau at quarterback. This -14 line might not be enough because I think San Francisco is going to be upset about last week. I think that they're going to be just rearing ready to go and show that they are the best team in the NFC, because I know a lot of people are kind of on that train at this point. I have them win 28-10. I think it's going to be a pretty, easy game offensively. They'll get, their guys going here in the passing game, especially Christian McCaffrey, Kittle, Ayuk, all those guys. And then the defense will just tee off on Blau in that offense and get the win.
I have a pretty similar score. I have San Francisco winning 28-6. I don't feel like I need to provide much analysis on the game. We see these two teams play football, and we understand what the differences are. But I do think that by 8:30ish on Monday morning, Cliff Kingsbury is looking for a job.
I certainly hope so, because the fact that he got extended last year, not to go on a tangent, what are they doing?
Yeah, maybe he was leveraging and saying oh, I'm going to go take a college job again, or I'd
be go ahead.
You never know what happens.
I would just be yeah, go for it. I'd rather you.
Their owner's also kind of a buffoon, so that
he's not great. He really hasn't done a whole lot well other than hiring Bruce Arians, and that was about it. And signing Kurt Warner back in 2008 or whatever it was. So moving on to Dallas at Washington. Dallas does still have the potential for the number 1 seed as well, so I do expect to see them play a lot of their starters. I think Washington, they're going to start Sam Howell, which I believe was not the case at first, and then Taylor Heinicke was basically man, why do I need to play this game? You already know what you have in me. Let Howell go out there and play, which I think was really nice of him to do as a teammate, and shouldn't have to do the coach's job. Ron Rivera, just throw that out there. Also, he probably doesn't even know if they're eliminated yet from the playoffs based on last week.
They're still playing for everything.
They're playing for everything. No, so I do think that Howell, I actually did like a decent bit in the draft to a certain degree, at least as a second, third round player, which is where he should have gone. I think he was a 5th round pick this past year, but interested to see what he does with his team. They have a lot of receiving talent, so it is going to be fun to see what that looks like. But obviously, I'm taking Dallas. I'll take 28-20. I think that Washington actually does score a decent amount of points just because Dallas isn't going to be willing to do too much on defensively special. I think they just want to get through the game, and they know they can do that with their offense.
Yeah, we have been really in tune with our scores and how we're predicting these games to go. So I have Dallas winning 27-23, and I think Dallas is going to be playing to win. But I do think Howell is good. I think if they design an offense in a college way, go RPO heavy, make sure you're getting it to your playmakers. Don't ask Howell to be an NFL quarterback. Just ask him to get the job done. They're going to be able to score points against this defense. And this kind of reveals how I feel about, and we'll get into this in future weeks, how I feel about the Dallas Cowboys going into these playoffs. Something just doesn't feel right there. And knowing that Mike McCarthy is their head coach, I'm sure I'm going to predict an upset in round one. I don't know if that would actually be an upset since the home team would be winning, but I think I would pick Tampa Bay over them. I don't think these Cowboys are really really what they were early on in the season, and even though they're going to be playing to win, I think it's going to take a large effort, maybe a CD Lamb like late touchdown to actually win this game.
Yeah, wouldn't be that surprising to me. So last game we got Detroit at Green Bay. Let's pull the heartstrings on the Lions fans a little bit more. For me, I do think Green Bay is winning 24-21. I think it's going to be probably like a last-second field goal because that's what's going to happen. The Lions have to lose in terrible fashion. That's kind of their MO for their entire franchise, unfortunately. Again, I'm going to preface, I do think this team does have a bright future. I think even if Jared Goff's the quarterback for the next year or so, like I think that he's played very, very well this year overall. You do have a future possibly in the next couple of years where you could be a playoff contention again, but I just don't think it's this year. And I think it's totally fair considering how they started for them not to be in the dance. And granted, I can't say much because my team's in the same boat. But at the same time, like I wouldn't fret too much, Lions fans. I do think you have a pretty bright future here. Brighter than the Packers, probably, considering who knows what's even going to happen at quarterback with them next year. Rodgers still hasn't confirmed whether he's even coming back despite signing a bajillion-dollar contract. So that's going to be fun. But I do think Green Bay pulls this one out and makes the Seattle game, regardless of how it goes. Obviously, I think Seattle will take it and not really have anything to play for if you're the Lions, but they'll make it a moot point at that point.
Yeah, so going back to my prediction where I do think the door is open for the winner of this game to make the playoffs as the 7 seed. I don't expect it to be I don't expect their hope to last, basically. I think this game is going to go a direction early and never really come back. Green Bay has found their running game in a very good way, and they're playing a bad rushing defense. And I think offensively, they're going to be able to go execute. It's going to be a night game in Lambeau. It's going to be cold. Jared Goff, I don't think the pass offense is going to be working that well for the Lions. I think the run game will still do things, but when you're playing a team that is going to be sound offensively, you're going to need a good passing attack, and I just don't think they have it. So I have Green Bay winning 38-20. I think they're going to emphatically take that last wild card spot, and it sucks because I would prefer the Lions to get into the playoffs, but I think this Green Bay team is really darn good right now, and that's what matters. And it comes back to an experience thing. They've been 13 plus wins each of the past few years, and they've been in these playoff situations, and they're going to want to get back there. And I think they just are going to be able to get it done in pretty dominant fashion, unfortunately for Lions fans.
I mean, yeah, that's just, I mean, I'm not going to be surprised if that's the case. I just feel like with mine, like Green Bay doesn't really play a style that lends itself to winning big right now. I think it's possible for sure if you get a couple big runs off for touchdowns and stuff like that. But again, it sucks for the Detroit Lions because I think that they deserve the chance to make the playoffs. But I already said that I think Seattle's going to make it a moot point anyway, which is unfortunate. But that scheduling definitely kind of sucks. Like I understand why they wanted that to be the night game, but like if you're the Lions and you see Seattle wins, it's just like what do you do? Like obviously you try to knock Green Bay out and let Seattle go ahead and do it, but it's going to be interesting to see what happens there. But that'll do it for this week for us. We'll definitely be back to talk about playoff stuff next week and go over that for sure, see what we think about the games. Obviously, with less games, we'll be able to focus more on the minutia of the game. We'll definitely try to do that. But like I said, that'll wrap it up for us this week with the ATB NFL Live Show. Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you next week.